pasuk says, Allah Elokim bisruah, Hashem b'koil shofar. That Elokim is exalted with the sruah, Hashem with the koil shofar. We know Elokim is midas adin, Hashem is midas rachamim. The Chazal say that through the sound of the shofar, the Ribono Shel Olam rises from the throne of din, and he sits upon the throne of rachamim. The Sfas says that this annual movement from the throne of din to the throne of rachamim really harkens back to the very beginning of B'riyas Olam. When Hashem created the world, Chazal tell us, the Ribono Shel Olam thought, it was Olav Machshava, he thought, to create the world of Midas Adin. This is why in the first parak of Bereshis, the name for Hashem is Elokim. The Ribono Shel Olam saw the world would not be miskayim, the world couldn't be sustained, the world couldn't last. Al pi Midas Adin. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in Shittuf. He made a partnership, including Midas HaRachamim. So at the very inception of Bria, we have Rachamim being coupled to Din. Pure Din is seen as unmanageable. The world can't survive. So there has to be a Shittuf, there has to be a blending in of Midas HaRachamim. And this was at the time of B'riyas Olam. So on an annual basis, when we have the anniversary of B'riyas Olam, Rosh HaShana, the same thing happens through the Shofar. But through the Shofar, the Midas Hadin has Midas HaRachamim blended into it. Let's see if we can understand this a little bit on a more down-to-earth level. Let's understand, what would the world have looked like had it been created with Midas Hadin? So we know, the Mesilas Yesharim tells us that if the world had been made with strict Midas Hadin, there would be three things that are different. Number one, Tshuva would not be accepted. Because we know that the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts Tshuva is a function of Midas HaRachamim. Al pi Midas Hadin, just because a person says he's sorry, resolves to be better, that can't take away what was done. So the fact that Tshuva is accepted is a consequence of Midas HaRachamim. Number two, the Mesilas Yesharim says, if the world would have been created with Midas Hadin, punishment would have been immediate. And that really is a consequence of the first point. If there was no possibility of tshuva, what would be the point of delaying punishment? It would be inevitable. Sooner or later, the person's going to get the punishment. So why wait? So punishment would have been immediate. And thirdly, the Mesilas Yesharim says punishment would have been totally absolute, to the point of utter destruction. A person defies the Melech Malchei Hamlochim, can't get off with a slap on the wrist. So if the world would have been made with strict Midas Hadin, the punishment would have been utter annihilation. It would be immediate, and there'd be no possibility of tshuva. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in Midas HaRachamim, now tshuva can be accepted, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu delays to give the person time to do tshuva, and even if he doesn't do tshuva, the punishment is not to the point of utter hashchasa, utter destruction. This is what Mesilas Yesharim says. The Baal HaTanya, in the Shayach Ve'amunah, writes a very cryptic thing. He writes, if the world would have been made with strict Midas Hadin, there would have been no divine revelation through Nevi'im or through miracles. There would have been total concealment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not have revealed himself through Nisim and not through Nevi'im. But because HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in the Midas HaRachamim, this is why there is his galus. This is why there is divine revelation, again, through Nevi'im and through miracles. Certainly what the Baal HaTanya is saying is al pi Kabbalah, al pi Sod, but to bring it down to a practical level, we can understand it in the following way. Everyone has nisyonos in life, and the nisyonos can be difficult. But with a little imagination, we could always conceive of the nisyonos being more difficult. As hard as they may be, but certainly it would be hard to figure out ways in which they could be even more difficult. Because if a person goes through a family crisis, But Baruch Hashem, his finances are in order. That's one level of crisis. But imagine having to go through the same family crisis and at the same time not having money in the bank. Even more difficult. Imagine if you have to go through those two crises with a physical handicap. Now the truth is this, that the Rebbeinu Shalom really is his prerogative to demand anything he wants of us. He created us, he gave us life, he put us here. If he wants to subject us to a difficult test, that's his prerogative. Because al pi midas hadin, he could demand the maximum from us. So for example, if you think about it for a moment, you realize the fact that we have a Torah makes the challenge much easier. We don't have to figure out on our own what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. We don't have to figure out on our own how to be good. We have a Torah that tells us how to be good. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have said, listen, I'm going to put you in the world, I'm going to expect you to figure out what it means to be good, and I'll hold you responsible for it. Could have done that. That would have been his prerogative. But because the Midas HaRachamim, Hashem gave us the Torah and said, I'm not going to make you figure it out yourself. You have a Torah, the Torah will tell you what it means to be good. Now all you have to do is to keep it. I'm not saying that's easy, but it's something a lot easier than having to figure out what to do and be held responsible for that. Now the truth is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have made it even harder than that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have made the world in such a way that his very existence was so hidden that not only would we have to figure out if there is a God, what he wants of us, but we'd have to figure out that there is a God. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have made the world with such hester, with such concealment, that it would be a challenge even to figure out that there is a God, and then to figure out what he wants of us, and then to live accordingly. It says the Balatanya, if the world would have been made with strict midas hadin, the challenge would have been so difficult, there would have been no hisgalus at all, there would be no revelation at all. There would be no divine fingerprints on the world. There would be no clue that there is a God, and he wouldn't have revealed himself, not through Nevi'im, not through miracles. We'd have to figure this out on our own, and then figure out what he wants of us, and then we'd have to live accordingly. That would be a much harder nisayon than the nisayoness we have. But al pi midas harachamim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes our lives easier. Through the Nevi'im, he revealed himself to us. Through miracles, he reveals himself to us. We know there is a God. We have a Torah ben Hashemayim. We know what he wants of us. No, we just have to live accordingly. Not, again, that it's easy, but it's not as difficult as it could have been. The fact that the Nisayon is not as difficult as it could have been, that is a function of midas harachamim. I once explained that this could answer the question of the Rosh in Maseches Rosh HaShana. The Gemara in Rosh HaShana says that the first two midas harachamim, we say in Slichas, we started last night, Hashem, Hashem. The first shame is Rachamim Kodim Sheyachta. Hashem is mercy before the person sins. The second shame is Rachamim La'achar Sheyachta V'yasa Tshuva. Hashem is mercy on the person after he sins and does Tshuva. So the Rosh asks the question, I understand why you need mercy after you sin. You sin, you need Tshuva. Hashem should accept the Tshuva. It's midas Rachamim. But why does a person need Rachamim before the person sins? L'chayra, he hasn't sinned yet. He doesn't need divine mercy. And the Rosh explains that the Chiddush is that even if you already had a hirur Aveira, he had a thought of doing an Aveira, an illicit thought, so perhaps the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should punish him for that. That's why we have the midas harachamim, that even Kodim Sheyachta, before he sins in action, Hashem doesn't punish him for the illicit thought. But Lefi Devareinu, as we're explaining, there could be another pshat, that the Rachamim Kodim Sheyachta is that he makes the challenges easier than they could have been. Before we sin, we haven't sinned yet. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends challenges our way. The challenges are easier than they could have been. The Sfas Emes asks the question, that what are Chazal saying? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make the world with midas hadin. He realized the world would not be miskayim, so he blended in midas harachamim. So, does that mean Hashem changed his mind? I mean, we would have said that HaKadosh Baruch Hu contemplated creating the world, and he realized right off the bat that the world would require a blend of midas hadin and midas harachamim. What does it mean? He thought to create with midas hadin. And then he blended in Midas Harachim. Was it to say there was a first thought, there was an afterthought? Was there a Shinoi Ratzon on the part of the Rebbeinu Shlomo? I think this observation points to the following direction. That in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hanhaga of the world, it isn't the pshat that he made the world with Midas Harachim right off the bat. There actually are times where there is Midas Hadin, there's a Hanhaga of Din, and then there's a blending of Rachamim. As the Sfasema says, by Shofar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits on the Kisei Din, and through the Tkiyah, he moves to the Kisei Rachamim. He doesn't start on the Kisei Rachamim, he starts on the Kisei Din. Through the Shofar, he then moves. So it's not the pshat that it's Rachamim. It starts as Din, and then it goes to Rachamim. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, there was a haschala, there was a beginning of Din, and then he blended in Rachamim. Now the truth is this, if you think about it for a second, if you look at the psukim, which are the basis of this Maimer Chazal, it's exactly true. Right? Rashi says that Hashem wanted to make the world of Midas Hadin, he saw it would not be Miskayim, so he blended in Midas Harachim. But the first parak of Reisha still says only Elokim. Hashem Elokim is only added with the Brias Adam. So there was a period where it was really Midas Hadin. And later he blended in Midas Harachim. So it's not the pshat that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that Midas Hadin is unsustainable, and therefore from the very inception he made it with Midas Harachim. There was a haschala of Din, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu blended in Rachamim. Along the lines that we're speaking, that one aspect of the Midas Harachim is making the Nisyonos easier than they could be. I think we have an example in Chumash of a Nisayon which initially was very, very difficult, and only later did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the Nisayon easier. And that's the Nisayon of ve-chatima. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked Avraham Avinu to perform the ve-chatima, that was a Nisayon which really is beyond that which he ever would ask of a human being, to sacrifice his son, and all that the ve-chatima entailed. Now, this is something which is really a Nisayon, which is a Nisayon al pi Midas Hadin. Midas Harachim would not have demanded of Avraham Avinu such a sacrifice. And the truth is, Darchei actually says this on the pasuk. If you look in the parsha of ve-chatima, how does it begin? Achar hadvarim v'ela v'ha Elokim nisas Avram. Elokim tested Avram. So the Darchei says in that pasuk that this Nisayon, he just writes in a very cryptic line. He says this Nisayon was al pi a very, very strict Midas Hadin. That's what he writes. The Nisayon of the ve-chatima was al pi a strict Midas Hadin, which means, as we explained, this was a Nisayon that the Midas Harachim would not have demanded of any human being. This is al pi a Midas Hadin, and this is a hanhaga that Hashem says. Sometimes He makes very, very great demands of tzaddikim al pi Midas Hadin. Avraham Avinu passed the test. He brought Yitzchak. He was willing to offer Yitzchak. And at the very last moment, Hashem sent a malach and said, no, don't do it. I'll pass for a mu'umah, don't do anything to Yitzchak, etc. We know that Avraham Avinu was mispalo. Chazal say, Rashi quotes, that everything he did to the ayah, everything he did to the ram, that he brought in the place of Yitzchak should be considered as if he did it to Yitzchak. Because he wanted to perform the ve-chatima, and therefore he asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should consider that everything he did to the Ayo should be as if he did it to Yitzchak. And there are Ramazim in Chazal that tefillah was answered. There's an amazing Gemara. The Gemara says that when the Olei Bavel came to Eretz Yisrael, and they had to identify the place of the Mizbeach. And we know that the place of the Mizbeach in the Beis HaMikdash was the spot where the ve-chatima was performed. But they had to identify the exact place. So the Gemara says that there were Nevi'im that came from Bavel, and they identified the spot because they saw the Afaro Shel Yitzchak. They saw the ashes of Yitzchak on that spot. So the question is, what ashes of Yitzchak? Yitzchak never was burnt. There was a ram that was burnt. But the idea is that the tefillah of Avram was accepted. That it was considered in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes that whatever he did to the ram was as if he did it to Yitzchak, and therefore the Nevi'im didn't see the ashes of the ram, they saw the ashes of Yitzchak. It was fulfilled. That was the blending of Midas Arachim. That was the blending of Midas Arachim. The initial Nisayon was Al Pi Midas Hadin. It was a very harsh, very strong demand. And when Avraham Avinu showed that he was willing, Hashem blended in the Midas Harachim and says, no, I'm not going to require this, I'm not going to demand this of you. Well, let me explain it a little more deeply. The Sfas Emes writes that the Akedah was never performed in the Olam HaMaisa, but it was performed in the Olam HaMachshava. In the realm of action, it never took place. But in the realm of thought, it took place. What does that mean? It's like this. Bringing it down to earth again. But let's say a person goes through a crisis, experiences a tremendous loss. The person only experiences the loss once in the Olam HaMaisa. In the world of action, it happens once. A person loses a loved one. It happens once. The person dies once. But how many times did the person live through the experience in the Olam HaMachshava? Thinking the worst. Of course, hoping for the best and preparing for the worst psychologically. How many times did the person go through the death and the passing and the entire crisis? Now, the person went through the events once in the Olam HaMaisa, many, many times in the Olam HaMachshava. When Avraham Avinu went to the Akedah, when he took Yitzchak to the Akedah, it's true, in the Olam HaMaisa, it never took place. But in the Olam HaMachshava, in the thinking of Avinu, in the realm of thought, how many times did he go through the Akedah? In the 3 days that Avram traveled with Yitzchak to Har Moriah, how many times in the Olam HaMachshava did he live through the experience of the Akedah? That's what the Sfas Emes says. In Lefid Varenu, we can understand it even more deeply. And there's a famous saying, a popular saying, that Ein Davar Eineg B'fnei Haratzon. That there's nothing which stands in the way of the will. Famous saying. So another Ger Rebbe, Imre Yama, said, what's the meaning of that saying? It's not true. I mean, nothing stands in the way of the will. There are things you want to do, and then you can't do. So he taiched, it means there's nothing which stands in the way of wanting. There may be obstacles to doing, but there are no ikuvim, there are no obstacles to wanting to do the right thing. That's ein davar ein b'fnei haratzon. Nothing stands in the way of wanting. Meaning, even things that you can't do in the Olam HaMaisa, you can do in the Olam HaMachshava. And therefore, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us nisyanos, sometimes He'll give us nisyanos in the Olam HaMachshava, which He won't give us in the Olam HaMaisa. There are things He doesn't expect us to do. He doesn't expect us to do them. But He expects us to want them. There are things we should want. He might not demand that we do them because they're not feasible. L'maisa, they may be too difficult to do. But He still demands of us that we should want them. And that was the Nisayon of the Akedah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not demand that Avram should actually slaughter Yitzchak. That's beyond. That's something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't expect of a human being. But He did demand of him that he should want to offer Yitzchak. And therefore, Avram went through the process of the Akedah and the Olam HaMachshava till almost the very last moment. Because that could be expected of Avram. That he should perform the Akedah and the Olam HaMachshava, that he should want to do it, that's an Nisayon that is acceptable. There's no obstacle to wanting. To the doing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, that price I don't demand of him. That much I'm not going to demand of him. Therefore, when it was about to cross that line from the Olam HaMachshava to the Olam HaMaisa, that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the Malach. Zachidu lozeh. We've merited to come to this point. that in the Akedah, the Nisayon was given with a strong Midas Adin, and then there was a subsequent blending of Rachamim, and the consequence of that blending of Rachamim was that which Avraham Avinu wanted, what he yearned for, was considered in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes as if he actually did it. That's the blending of Rachamim into Din. Midas Adin. He didn't do it. But since he did, in the Olam HaMachshava, the Akedah, meaning he wanted to perform the Akedah, he yearned to perform the Akedah, so Al Pi Midas HaRachamim, Hashem considered that which he wanted as if he did it. In a real sense, that's what happens every year with the Shofar. Let's understand it a little deeply. Now, the Shofar is a very confusing thing, because there are so many symbols in the Shofar. We know that Reb Sadi Gaon Dabbajan brings 10 different symbols to the Shofar. It stands for this, it stands for that. Almost to the point that the Shofar means so much that we don't know what to think about it anymore. It's just this total confusion. It reminds us of Matan Torah, it reminds us of Yosef Mashiach, it reminds us of the trumpets that were used to coronate kings. It's Oirus to do tshuva. It reminds us of the Akedah, because the Akedah was replaced by a ram that had horns. And there's so much, it's hard to make sense out of how it all fits together and what we're really accomplishing with the Shofar. I think the idea is like this. The fundamental essence of the Shofar, the place in the Torah where the Shofar functions in a paradigmatic way, is the Shofar of Yovel. The Shofar of Yovel. That when time comes that the Avodim go free and people return to their states, so the Shofar is sounded on Yom Kippur, and V'shavtim ishel chuzasar v'ishel mishpachot hashutim. The Mefarshim explain, the Maharsha explains in Rosh HaShana Daf Aleph, that the Shofar symbolizes freedom. It symbolizes freedom. Freedom to leave my masters who enslaved me, freedom to return to my homeland. That's what the Shofar symbolizes. We would not be far off if we would say that the Shofar of Rosh Hashanah also symbolizes freedom of a different sort. And that's what I mean. The Gemara says in Brachos that the various Amoraim used to daven different tefillas when they finished Shemona Esrei. One of the tefillas was the following. Golav Yadua, it's well known, Shiritzonein Olasos V'Tzeinecha. We tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know that we really want to do your will. Umi Ma'akev, so what's stopping us? Soor should be Isa, the sourdough in the batch, V'Shibin Malchus, the enslavement of the kingdoms. Meaning that there are two obstacles to Avodas Hashem. One obstacle to Avodas Hashem is internal. We have internal obstacles. We all have Yetzer Haras, we all have desires, we all have wants. So that's an obstacle to Avodas Hashem. The other obstacles are external. Shibin Malchus, we live in Golus, there are constraints, persecutions, also stops us. So we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, you really know that we want to be your servants. But so why don't we? Because we have these two sets of obstacles. We have the internal obstacles, that's the Sorah Shabisa. We have the external obstacles, which is the Shibud Malchus. The Shofar of Matan Torah symbolizes freedom from the internal obstacles. Chazal tell us that Hashem says, Barasi Yetzer Hara, I made the Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin, I made Torah as the antidote. Chazal say, Mishnah Dirk Yovas, Ein Ben Chayrin, the only person who's truly free is the person who learns Torah, and the Mefarshim tell us that means free from desire, free from the Yetzer Hara. The Shofar, which, as we saw from Yovel, is the symbol of freedom, finds itself at Matan Torah too, because Matan Torah is the beginning of freedom from the internal constraints. we were given a Torah, which is the tablet for the Yetzer Hara, learning Torah, being basic in Torah. This liberates us, it frees us from those internal constraints. That's why the Shofar finds itself in Matan Torah. It's the same Shofar as the Shofar of Yovel. The Shofar of Yovel symbolizes freedom in a social sense. I'm not enslaved. I'm able to return to my homeland. The Shofar of Matan Torah symbolizes a freedom of different sorts. A freedom from the internal constraints to avodas Hashem. The Shofar of Yemos HaMashiach symbolizes freedom from the external constraints. The enslavement of the kingdoms, persecutions, all that's meant to end when we have the V'haya v'yamali yitaka b'shofar gogel. That on that great day, the great shofar will be sounded, and everyone will return from Golos. No more persecution, no more torment. That really is the relief from the external constraints. So what the shofar is really the freedom from all the obstacles to avodas Hashem. The internal obstacles, the external obstacles, that's what it is. The Ramchal says in the Maimor HaChachma that when we blow the shofar in Rosh HaShana, it's really the link in a chain from the shofar of Matan Torah to the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. We are in between. We are reinforcing the shofar of Matan Torah, and we are anticipating the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. And again, everything he says is al pi Kabbalah, but to bring it down to our level of understanding, it means like this. When we sound the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, what we are saying is that we really want to hear the shofar of Matan Torah, and we want to hear the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. We want to be free of the internal constraints. And that freedom is symbolized by the shofar of Matan Torah. We want to be free from the external constraints. That is really the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. That's what we want. We are blowing the shofar. We want to hear in our shofar the sound of the shofar of Matan Torah and the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. And that really is the greatest Kabbalah So'el Malchus Shemayim. That is really the Kabbalah of Hashem as a king. Because to accept a person as a king, to accept the HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a king, doesn't only mean I recognize you're my king. It means that I commit myself to serving you faithfully, wholeheartedly. And that means there's a she'ifa, there's a yearning for all the obstacles to be removed. You know, the Poskim discuss a very interesting shayla. What if you have a situation where a person is an onus? He's constrained by circumstances beyond his control, but he's happy about it. Because even if he wouldn't be an onus, he wouldn't want to do the mitzvah anyway. So how do you look at that? Do you look at that as oinus? Do you look at that as ratzon? It's a good shayla. But I think it would be safe to say that certainly b'dinei shamayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't say that this person is an onus, this person is constrained, if really, even had he not been constrained, he wouldn't do the mitzvah anyway. In other words, it can't be that we're not doing the Ratzon Hashem because of various constraints, but we're overjoyed to have the constraints. We wouldn't want the constraints to be removed. Certainly the Kabbalah's oil means not only that I acknowledge the reality, the fact of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being Melech, but I yearn for the hasara, for the removal of all the obstacles to serving him. And therefore the Tekiyah Shofar of Rosh Hashanah, which is, again, as we said, the yearning to hear the shofar of Matan Torah, which is the removal of the internal constraints, and the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach, which is the external constraints, that is the greatest Kabbalah's Ol Malchus. So when Abu Dram says that the shofar symbolizes Kabbalah's Malchus, because the ancient practice was that when they crowned the king, they blew trumpets, it's much deeper than that. It's not just because it echoes an ancient practice. In the shofar of Matan Torah and the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach are peripheral remazim. It's all one. In other words, the yearning to hear the shofar of Matan Torah and to hear the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach, that is the Kabbalah's Ol Malchus. That's what I want. I want to have all the constraints removed. I want to be able to serve the Rebbeinu Shloim fully, 1,000%. So for that, I need certain things to happen. I need the shofar of Matan Torah. I need the shofar of Yemos HaMashiach. The wanting to hear those shofaras is the Etzem Kabbalah's Oil Malchus. Rav Dessler brings a medrash. And the medrash says an amazing thing, that where did those two shofaros come from? The shofar of Matan Torah and the shofar of Mashiach. Where did HaKadosh Baruch Hu get those shofars from? So the medrash says those two shofaros were the two horns of the ram of the Akedah. The ayil that Avram brought in place of Yitzchak, its two horns became the two horns in history. The left horn, which is the smaller horn, was the shofar of Matan Torah, and the right horn, which is the larger horn, is the shofar of Mashiach, and that's why V'haya b'yamahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. That's why it's called the shofar gadol, because it's larger than the other one. That's what the Medrash says. So what is this idea that the two shofaros really came from the ayil of the Akedah? The idea is as follows: that Avraham Avinu also overcame obstacles that were both internal and external to form the Akedah. And when we talked past years about the Nisayon of the Akedah, there are many different aspects to it, of course, on the simplest level. To bring himself to slaughter his own son is a tremendous Nisayon. There's a natural love fathers have for their sons. On top of everything else, we know that Avraham Avinu yearned for an heir, a successor, more than anything in life. He said, what can you possibly give me if I'm not going to have children? And this was his she'ifa, to have an heir. So naturally, there was a very strong desire, a natural desire to preserve Yitzchak, not to sacrifice him. And Avraham overcame that. But we pointed out, Svarim tell us there were external constraints too. Because Avraham Avinu had made a career out of preaching to the entire world that Rebbeinu Shloim is a God of love. He doesn't want human sacrifice. He doesn't want the ways of the Evdei Zara. And now all of a sudden, Avraham Avinu was being called upon to do something which he has made a career out of calling abhorrent and distasteful, and so on and so forth. So first of all, there would be tremendous embarrassment, zyonis. But in those days, people didn't work with kid gloves either. There might have been even a sakana. People would have said, you're the biggest hypocrite walking on 2 feet. Says, we'll deal with you. There may even have been a physical sakana, for all one knows, had the word gotten out that he performed the sacrifice. Because Avraham Avinu overcame even the external constraints. That means, and Dessler really explains this, that everything that was included in the shofar of Matan Torah and in the shofar of Yom Mashiach, the removal of all the constraints, really was contained within the Akedah. The Avraham Avinu's passing the Nisayon of the Akedah really foreshadowed everything that Klal Yisrael would experience as a nation in Matan Torah and Yom Mashiach. It was the total overcoming of every possible constraint in order to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom wholeheartedly. And what was the Seif Davar? The Seif Davar was that Hashem said that I'm not going to demand it of you. Because since in the Olam HaMachshava, as we said, you did it, I will consider it as if you did it in the Olam HaMaisa, and as we said, that the ashes that the Navi saw were not the ashes of the ram, they were the ashes of Yitzchak. Because that was the Midas HaRachamim that was blended in, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Abraham that what you were willing and ready to do, I'll consider as if you did. And when we blow the shofar, that's exactly what happens. When we blow the shofar, and as we said, the shofar is meramas to the shofar of Matan Torah and the shofar of Yom Mashiach, and our yearning to have all the obstacles removed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us, okay, you've demonstrated your desire, your yearning to serve me faithfully, right? I will consider it as if you did so, even though we didn't do so. Right? Our past year certainly demonstrated that we didn't do so, right? But since at this moment I have that desire of Ritzoneinu L'Asos Ritzonecha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will consider it as if you did, and thereby you'll be Zeich B'Din. And that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu rising from the Kisei Din and sitting in the Kisei Rachamim. Just as in the case of Avraham Avinu, that Avraham Avinu's desire was considered action on the part of the Rebbeinu Shalom, so it is that our desire is considered as if it was action on the part of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and therefore through that we are Zeich B'Din. And that really is the very powerful function of the shofar. That the shofar enables us to tap into the schus of the Akedah. It enables us to hear the sounds of the shofar of Matan Torah and Yemos HaMashiach. It enables us to express our yearning to have all the obstacles removed, which is the Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shemayim itself, and thereby HaKadosh Baruch Hu blends in the Midas HaRachamim, and our desires become in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes as if we realize them, and thereby we are Zoiche B'din. They're very, very powerful avodah, but in a practical sense, it may explain a very cryptic halacha that we practice during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. The Shulchan Aruch says a very, very odd thing. Shulchan Aruch says there's a minhag that during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, people should be machmir in not eating pas palta, the bread of a Gentile baker. Now this is muter mi'ikar adin. In a place where there is no Jewish baker, certainly a person is allowed to eat bread of a Gentile baker. You're not inclined to bake yourself at home to avoid it. But during Aseret Yemei Tshuva, it's a chasidus, a person should be careful. The basis of this is a Yerushalmi, that the Yerushalmi says, there was an Amar told his son, that even though you don't have the practice generally to eat chulin b'tara, to eat your regular food in the state of tara, but 7 days a year you should be strict. And the Torah brings from the Avi Ezri, he has a Kabbalah, that the meaning of that statement, 7 days, means the 7 days between Rosh HaShana and Yom Kippur. So there's an Indian of the Chasidus that the person should eat chulin b'tara, and the Shulchan Aruch translates this into avoiding the bread of a Gentile baker. At first glance, it's very hard to understand. We know when we think of tshuva, tshuva always means permanent change. As the Rambam says, what is tshuva? That sheyaz ve-chatima, you should leave the sin, yosirim machshavta, remove it from his thoughts, v'yigmor b'libo shlo yaseyu oid, resolve in his heart never to do it again. Whereas a real tshuva means permanent change. It doesn't mean crying your eyes out. It doesn't mean screaming the slichas. It means making genuine change. And that's why the people that are wise advise us that we should be guided by the rule, tafastam rubu like tafasta. If you grab off more than you can chew, you're not going to be successful. So they tell us that when a person contemplates making changes in his life, he has to be very practical. What is feasible? What is reasonable? What can I do? Right? What at this point can I not do? And the person should select things that are reasonable and things that are doable. And as Hashem, we'll be able to make some change for the better. But if you try to do everything too much and things that are impossible, you're not going to be successful. So we all understand this, that if tshuva is meant to be genuine change, permanent change, it's by definition limited, it's restricted, it deals with questions of feasibility. But certainly if there's something that I'm going to do which is a little bit over the top, and I have no intention of maintaining it after Yom Kippur, that's not tshuva. So what is the idea that in the Aseret Yemei Tshuva there should be such an idea that there should be a hanhag of chasidus, I should act in a special pious way, even though I have no intention of resuming this after Yom Kippur, but just l'chavod the Aseret Yemei Tshuva. How does that fit with the whole avodah of tshuva? If tshuva means making genuine, permanent change, what could the Indian be of having acts of piety, acts of chasidus, which I only do during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva? And it is as follows. As we said, that in the Olam HaMaisa, in the world of action, there are constraints. And we have to be mindful of them. We have to be mindful of what we can do, what we can't do, what is reasonable, what is feasible, what is beyond our control, what is within our control. But when a person is practical in that sense, a person can make a very serious mistake. He can turn his limited efforts into a shita in life. He can say that my aspiration is not to be a tzaddik yesod olam. I'm happy to be an average, plain person. It's good enough for me. Now, the Mesilas Yesharim already refers to this. The Mesilas Yesharim says that there are people that said, Lama li, why do I need so much chasidus and precious, so much piety? He says, it's good enough. I shouldn't be from the Rishonim that go into Gehenna. That's good enough for me. But I have to be the Tzaddik Hadar. As long as I save myself from Gehenna, I'm fine. The Mesilas Yesharim says that that person should think the following. He should think, when it comes to worldly pursuits, no one says I'm happy to be mediocre and average. Everyone wants to be a millionaire, everyone wants to be successful, so why only in worldly things? Why not in spiritual things? Why don't you aspire to greatness? Okay, something to think about. But there's a danger. We turn our Benoniyut, our being kind of middle of the road, into a sheet in life. And there's a Maisa, so the Chazon Ish, that there was a certain religious party that the Chazon Ish was not particularly fond of, because he believed that its adherents and the settlements that they established, they weren't medactic in halacha. Now, for us, it's hard to imagine these things, but in those days, milking cows on Shabbos was a big burning issue. How to milk the cows and where this mutter. In any case, this group, he felt, was not sufficiently committed to the halakha. And he was very sharp in his rebuke of them, and so on and so forth. So someone came to the Chazon Ish and asked him like this. He says, when Jews come to visit you, for advice, for brachas, for help, you welcome everybody, you accept everybody, you're friendly to everybody. So why is it that when it comes to this group, you're so critical and so harsh in dealing with them? He says, you always accept everybody, with a smile, with a welcome. He says, why not them? So the Chazon Ish said like this. He said that all those Yidden who come, they're not necessarily very pious and devout Yidden, but they understand that really what they should want in life is to be tzaddikim. He says they feel they have a Yetzer Hara, they have constraints, things they can't do, so they haven't turned their mediocrity into a shita. They haven't turned it into a philosophy. But this party, right, has turned it into a philosophy. So that's abhorrent. That's unacceptable. That's what the Chazon Ish said. This is a tremendous danger. Tremendous danger if we limit ourselves in the avodah of tshuva, and we make a serious cheshbon nefesh. We take ourselves seriously and we say, well, this I can do, this I can't do. So this year, half measures. It might be the most practical way to approach tshuva, but on the other hand, there's a tremendous sakana. And I might turn my being average, balanced, mediocre, not passionate, into a sheet, into an ideal. So therefore the Shulchan Aruch says that at the same time that you think practically about how to improve and how to change, you express your she'ifa, your yearning for living in the highest plane. That's the idea why in Aseres to make tshuva specifically, at the same time that we conduct ourselves in very practical and limited ways on the path to permanent change, at the same time we express our she'ifa, our yearning for chasidus, for living in the highest plane of spirituality, by conducting ourselves with chumras and acts of chasidus which we have no intention of ever carrying out beyond Yom Kippur. Right? This is the way we demonstrate that at the same time that we are living one way in the Olam HaMaisa, but in the Olam HaMachshav I'm living on a different plane. In the Olam HaMachshav I'm living on that lofty plane. And that is really the schus of Rosh HaShana. The school of the Shofar, right, which is Master the Akedah, is exactly that. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying that if you express, if you show that you want, and that's what the Shofar symbolizes, the wanting to hear the Shofar of Matan Torah, the wanting to hear the Shofar of Yom Mashiach, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that which you yearn for in the Olam Machshava, Hashem al Pimidas Arachim will consider as if you did, and you'll be Zoicha B'din. But you have to show that you really want. So that the practice of Chasidus is, in a way, that demonstration, a demonstration of wanting to live in a higher plane. These are the thoughts for Rosh HaShana. But the main thing is that we should approach it with seriousness. We should not give up. Sometimes we come to Rosh HaShana and we feel that we haven't prepared adequately. We're not ready. And almost going into it, we feel that all is lost. Let's share with you a Chassidish Maisa, but maybe it will be a bit of inspiration. The Baal Shem Tov had a Talmud, whose name was Rav Kitzis. He was the Baltikeya in the Baal Shem's minyan. And the Baal Shem taught him the kavanas. Al-Pi Kabbalah, there are kavanas behind the tekiyas. What this tekiya stands for, this shvarim, this pru, this tekiya. All sorts of mystical kavanas. It's appropriate to have them in mind in the principle of Shofar. So the Baal Shem Tov taught him the kavanas, and he was meant to have them when he blew the Shofar. Of course, he didn't have a very good memory, so he wrote them down on a piece of paper, which he planned on having in front of him when he blew Shofar to refer to during the tekiyas. At this point, you can guess what happened. That he lost a piece of paper. And when it came time to tekiya Shofar, he wasn't able to have any of the kavanas. So he blew Shofar like everyone blew Shofar. So after Rosh HaShana, the Baal Shem came to him and said, I want you to know that the tekiya Shofar this year was la'ela. It was unprecedented. What this tekiya Shofar accomplished was the Shemayim, you can't imagine. So the Talmud Rav said, Rebbe, I have to tell you the truth. I lost a piece of paper, didn't have any of the kavanas. Right? How could the tekiya Shofar have been anything? So Hashem said like this: you should know that there are many doors that separate us and the Ribono Shel Olam. Many doors, many locked doors, and every kavana, the kavana of this tekiya, the kavana of that tekiya, is a key. There's a key that opens another door. So you blow this tekiya with kavanah, it opens that door. You blow with the next tekiya, it opens the next door, it opens the next door. So he says, but there's one master key. It's called an axe. If you have an axe, you don't need any keys. You break down all the doors. That's the one kavanah. What is that kavanah? That kavanah is leiv nishbar v'nitke elakim leisivzeh. That a Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't score on a broken heart. So the Hashem said that even if that broken heart is because you feel that you haven't adequately prepared for Rosh HaShana, he says that's the loftiest kavanah. That kavanah breaks down all the doors. I think all of us feel that way. I think every year we come into Rosh HaShana, and I don't remember a year, at least in memory, that I didn't tell myself this. I never felt less prepared for Rosh HaShana than this year. And, I said it this year, I said it last year, I said it the year before, I said it the year before. I don't remember before that, but certainly, every year you have this feeling, you're going into it, and mamish, you just fall into it, and it's here. And where did Elul go? And where did the 3 weeks go? And where did all the hachanas and everything I should have done? Nothing happened. Right? Maybe I bought the honey. I'm lucky I at least did that. But there's no hachanas, no preparation, nothing. We're going into it mamish cold. Okay, we said slichas last night. But we all feel that way. We should know that even coming with that kavanah, the sense that am I prepared? No, I'm not prepared. Right? That also, said the Baal Shem, that's the leiv nishbar v'nidke elakim leisivzeh. That broken heart is also an axe that could break down all the doors. So Be'ezus Hashem, that we may not know the lofty kavanas, and maybe we've only scratched the surface of our understanding of what Rosh HaShana is all about, but hopefully Be'ezus Hashem, at least if we come to the tefillas of Rosh HaShana, to the avodah of Rosh HaShana, with even that much, that sense of inadequacy, hopefully the Rebbe will consider that as well. And that'll be the leiv nishbar v'nidke elakim leisivzeh, that our desire in the Olam HaMachshava should be considered as if we were Mekayim in the Olam HaMaisa. Everyone should have a ksiva ve-chatima for a good Geben Shiar, the Sifrim Shel Tzadikim.